So, as you can see, we have a great group of leaders here for you. Moderating the panel, you heard Rafael Reyes, Vice President of Community Initiatives for Prospect Silicon Valley. And now what I get to do is feel badly about myself as I introduce all of our esteemed panelists. So we'll start with Nuria Fernandez, the General Manager and Chief Executive Officer of the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority. As CEO, Ms. Fernandez directs VTA operation and implementation of key programs, including bus and rail service serving over 40 million riders, construction of mass transit facilities, congestion management, and planning and construction of highway and other related projects. She is also responsible for transit legislation, policy development, and serves as an intergovernmental liaison with federal, state, and local governments. And I was working on intergovernmental liaison. It's not that easy to say. Ms. Fernandez is a senior executive with over 30 years of experience in the transportation field. She previously served as Chief Operating Officer for the New York State Metropolitan Transportation Authority, managed the operations of O'Hare International Airport, which I imagine many of you have flown in and out of at some point, or yesterday, or this morning, and provided high-level policy and program expertise at the U.S. Department of Transportation. Next is Angelina Galiteva, right here. She was appointed by California's governor and confirmed by the state Senate to the 5-member Board of Governors of the California Independent System Operator Corporation in 2011, and again in 2014. The independent system operator is responsible for the reliable operation of the power grid in the state of California and for the efficient operation of the electricity market, including the integration of renewable energy. She's the founder and chair of the Board for Renewables 100 Policy Institute and also serves as a chairperson for the World Council for Renewable Energy. Both organizations are dedicated to the successful deployment of renewable energy technologies and the policy that support them on a global scale. Ms. Galiteva is also principal at Any Options, Inc., a renewable energy and new technology product design firm. Her industry expertise includes serving as executive director of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, the largest municipal utility in the United States. Okay, so far so good. Bill Mitchell, as senior director for Microsoft's worldwide public sector team, Bill Mitchell leads the company's worldwide public sector business development for its cities and sustainability solutions. Over the last 5 years, Mr. Mitchell has built an ecosystem of strategic partner relationships with software companies, universities, and government to deliver innovative and economically sustainable solutions for smart cities. During his 12 years at Microsoft, he has managed new strategic partnerships with the largest software and services companies, as well as startups in smart buildings, energy management, and product lifecycle management. In his work on city-scale solutions, he has forged strategic partnerships with Singapore Smart Nation, City of Seattle, University of California, Energy Efficiency Center, and Cubic Transportation. And last is Ryan Popple, the president and CEO of Proterra, the leading innovator of zero-emission battery electric buses. Prior to Proterra, Ryan was partner at Kleiner Perkins, Caulfield & Byers. An early employee of Tesla Motors, he was senior director of finance with a focus on strategic planning, technology cost reduction, and corporate finance. Ryan serves as a board member of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group and is focused on increasing access to affordable, sustainable transportation solutions throughout Silicon Valley and the Bay Area through strategic partnerships and policy initiatives. He's also a member of the California League of Conservation Voters Green Advisory Council, where he provides guidance on the political and legislative priorities, communications planning, and development efforts. Go ahead, Rafael.
All right. Thank you very much, Josh, and thank you for your incredible support of our work. It's incredibly valuable to have you here, and it's really quite a pleasure to be here with such a distinguished panel. And I was reflecting on the discussion at the beginning of the day and was struck in particular by Dermot O'Connell of Tesla and his comment that right now there's this incredible tension between everything moving so quickly and why can't this move faster? And that seems to be, one of the underlying themes. And Steve Wesley, who gave the keynote address, though, of course, talked about solar. And frankly, if we had been having this event 10 years ago, it would have been dominated by solar as a topic, right? But now it's kind of passé to talk about solar because it's like, okay, it's moving so quickly and it's on its own, right? And it's kind of out there and doing its thing, and we don't need to, dedicate as much attention to it. That's almost the feeling, right, that one has about what's happening in the space. And of course, everything that we're talking about here is on, hopefully, this trajectory to do the same thing that solar has done. So solar is both the benchmark of what we're after, but it's also the driver in many ways to put all these pieces together. And what I'm excited about in this discussion is bringing together folks who are, really dealing with how to make this real on the ground, right, and at scale. So the topic for the panel is driving impact, today's advances and strategic implications. And would like to start, Nuria, with you. And of course, VTA has huge footprint and impact in the region, over 44 million riders annually in your mobility system, and much more than just buses, right? You actually are dealing with transportation across the entire spectrum in the region. And maybe you can start us off with, what excites you most about the advances VTA is making, because you're doing a lot of great work.
Sure. Before that, I just want to say good afternoon to everyone, and to thank the Prospect Silicon Valley for pulling together this day of information and idea exchange. And I also want to deal with the elephant in the room. No, it was not I causing the congestion on 101 northbound by flying here in my automated taxi drone. But I hope that a few years from now, we will be doing that. That technology would have advanced to a level where we're not all using the existing surface, and that is the lanes and roads throughout our community. The thing that excites me the most is, and I have to just take you back 4 years ago when I came to Silicon Valley to accept the position as the General Manager CEO for the Valley Transportation Authority. I had this vision. I had been here, but for other reasons, never really explored the Valley and had the opportunity to meet and visit with some of the tech companies. But I had this vision of Disney World. And if you just bear with me, coming from New York, I had went to school in the Midwest. I worked in Washington, D.C., and then worked in New York. Coming here thinking, my goodness, it's Silicon Valley. It's got to be amazing. So the same experience as you're going to Disneyland or Disney World, you drive up, you park, you get on the tram, you spend $400 on a ticket to get in, and then it's this magical world. It's this alternate reality of things that fly and signs that beam, but then I come here and that was not the reality. I felt as if I were anywhere but Silicon Valley, because the innovation is born here, it starts here, but we don't see it, we don't live it. And I thought, well, we need to change that. And I challenged my team to start thinking creatively of how we can bring Silicon Valley to Silicon Valley through our transportation mobility opportunity. Unlike many transit systems around the country, our transportation authority is responsible for not just buses and trains. We are responsible for highways and expressways, funding expressways, bicycle and pedestrian lanes and paths. So in essence, we have the opportunity and we have a mandate to create a network that brings all of these different modes of transportation into a place where you have choices, but those choices are integrated in such a way that there's a synergy. I said, how do we get there? Well, we need to start building a foundation. So we created, I assigned Gary Mitchel to work with me and do research, and we created an innovation center. An innovation center that was not intended to allow, to hire employees to VTA so that we could create things. It was really a place where we could attract all this talent in Silicon Valley and have the conversations. And to be able to say, this is a place for you. We provide mobility. We provide transportation mobility. How can you, tech companies in Silicon Valley, how can you, the luminaries of innovation, use this infrastructure that we have created to test your systems, to test all this technology that then gets packaged and sold elsewhere? So that in itself really is an opening of the door to an investment of billions of dollars of miles and miles of roads, highways and express lanes, of miles of track through our fixed guideways that can not only continue to operate its intended use, but be able to overlay technology that would make it more efficient, that would interconnect it, so that we're not working in silos, so that we can take full advantage of the renewable energy and the new opportunities that are constantly being integrated into the transportation system. Transportation, as a matter of fact, public transportation is the original shared economy form of transportation. We bring people together, we put them in a common vehicle, but it's available to everyone, and it helps them get to the places they want to get to. So how do we take that? How do we overlay some of this technology and making sure that we continue to be environmentally responsible, overlay technology to this, and stay relevant? My main concern is that we've got some tremendous opportunities, but we also have some big challenges. And the biggest challenge for us in transit and for us here at the VTA is ensuring that we stay relevant, that the options that people need are options that we can provide. But we have to bring our entire system, not just the technology that we can partner with. We'll hear a little bit from Proterra soon, and we have this great partnership with them to start renewing our fleet of rail and buses. It's really looking at the entire ecosystem of the infrastructure, that is, the roads, the streets, the highways and express lanes that are being designed to 20th century standards, and we're continuously rebuilding them to technology for traffic signals that are from the past century as well, and looking at the toll systems and what kinds of new technologies will help not only interconnected vehicles, but those vehicles that continue to operate that are not interconnected, but can still maintain the degree of safety that is required for us to move a little faster, but yet safer throughout this whole network of rail and roads and streets, highways, et cetera. So I see from where I sit that the Valley Transportation Authority really has the opportunity to be a convener. We are a public sector. We are a public industry, a public agency. So clearly, we do not have the wherewithal to start to explore, but we do have the ability to bring technology to the hundreds of thousands of people and the millions that we serve each year, and to form the types of partnerships where we can, in fact, elevate Silicon Valley to this model of innovation and transportation mobility, not only for us here in our region, not only for the state of California, but for the nation and the world.
Great, thank you, Nuria. And we're, of course, fortunate to be partnered with you and your team on a couple of exciting initiatives, working with Gary, who's around here somewhere. There's the man. And that includes autonomous vehicles, opportunities shared, electric autonomous vehicles, as well as a very exciting electric bus vehicle-to-grid integration project that hopefully will help drive the business case for rapid deployment of electric buses, and Proterra, of course, is a partner in that. And Nuria, digging a little bit deeper to some of your comments, you mentioned, putting Gary organizationally to lead innovation, establishing the Innovation Center. Can you talk a little bit more from a strategic perspective how you're seeing, driving innovation at scale within your organization?
Of course, yes. Everyone wants to be part of innovation. It's exciting, it's attractive, it's the new flavor of the month. But one of the things that we also have to be mindful of is that we are a public agency. And I'll just share a quick story. When we started talking amongst ourselves about creating this innovation center, half of the organization wanted to be part of it. And then people start to realize, well, there's this innovation center, and what does that mean to my job? Not so much as, am I going to lose my job if we move in a direction where you no longer need an individual to do the type of work that we have been doing for a number of years, but it was more of, I don't know that much about this, and am I still going to be viewed as a value to the organization? And it was not just the individuals within our management strata, it was also out in our garages and at our light rail yard. Many of the operators came up to me and said, I hear that you're spending a lot of time on innovation, but you have to remember that we still need to move these buses down the streets. We still need to provide service to our customers. So I said, aha, this is true. What exactly, if I were to ask one of our customers, what would be your ideal public transportation system look like? I can guarantee that none of them is going to say, I'm looking for a flying bus. I am looking for a vehicle that is automated. And maybe now they will start talking more about automation. What they're looking for is for safety, reliability, and cleanliness. And they want to make sure that the vehicle is there, whether it's a train or a bus, that it's there when they need it so that they can get to where they want to go. So this whole overlay of technology is something that we're bringing as an added value to the service that we provide. But we still have to be mindful that we are providing this service to individuals that just want to think about what they're getting on. They want to just know that they can get to where they want to go in a timely fashion.
Yes.
So that was really more of a kind of reality check. But interestingly enough, there's still a lot of excitement around the opportunities that Gary and Greta Helm, who works with him, continue to bring to us. So we're looking at clean technology. I've made a commitment of 20% electric buses for our fleet. We have a fleet of 474, so that we have 5 buses that are going to be rolling onto our property this year. We're looking at Ryan. We have the agreement with Proterra for 5, an additional 5, and then to be able to get another 25 or so over the next few years. That is going to start changing the whole. It's going to be a paradigm shift. It's going to be require training of our operators and our maintainers. It's going to require a whole new strategy around the charging of these vehicles, partnerships, and I'm so grateful for the partnership with Prospect and with the ANREL group, because we're going to have to think about this different. And we can't be timid. We can't say, okay, we're going to get these electric buses, but because this is new to us, on the bus side, we've been having electric trains for the past 30 years, but on the bus side, that we're only going to take these buses up to the next 10 miles. We want to go the 175 miles and back, because that's important, that it's not just viewed as a shuttle, that in fact it is an integrated new technology for us, newer technology into an existing fleet of services.
Thank you. And drawing on that, Angelina, turning to you, I like to think of the Cal ISO as the most important energy entity that nobody knows about.
That's the way we like it.
Drawing on Nuria's comments on people being concerned about safety, reliability, and cleanliness, and others have said people don't care about clean energy and efficiency, they want cold beer and hot showers, right? And in some ways, you're responsible for making sure that actually happens, right, reliably. What excites you from the standpoint of where you sit in terms of what's happening in the space?
Well, yes, and thank you again for organizing this event. It's always good to have discussions and to be able to talk cross-sectoral about where energy is going and where services are going as a whole. The CAISO is responsible for the reliable service, yes, and we don't like to be in the news. We don't like people talking about us. If you're talking about us, that means the grid failed somewhere and you didn't have power. So being under the radar allows us to operate quite efficiently, but we're also, and it's become increasingly interesting, the ISOs and the grid operators worldwide in the energy sector have become the most active agents of change. we are mandated to incorporate renewables on the grid. As you know, the RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standard, requires that we reach 30% renewables by 2020, 50% renewables by 2030, and now we have a bill, which I hope most of you will support, to going 100% renewable energy on the grid by 2045, which is quite an awesome task. And initially, utilities and grid operators too, we were guilty. When they said 10% renewables, oh no, those intermittent renewables, they're just going to disrupt the grid and grid operations. We like 24/7 stable, fossil-based, reliable power with all the redundancy so we can reliably operate the grid. You inject all this intermittent solar and wind, you're going to disrupt the grid and we can't guarantee reliability. Well, the mandates require them to incorporate 10%. Turned out it was okay. Then they said 20%. Again, brouhaha, oh no, Armageddon, we're going to have disruptions everywhere, the grid's going to fail. Thou shalt do it. Regulations pushed us along again. We incorporated 20% and it worked. When the 30% started coming along, there was a little bit of, mumbling again. Oh, 30%, it's going to be really difficult, it's really hard, how are we going to do that? Hey, let's take a trip to Germany. Let's see how the Europeans are doing it. And the Europeans were incorporating more renewables. So, of course, our guys said, well, they can't be better than us. We're going to beat the Europeans. We'll go further than 30%. Heck, we can do 50%. That, word started getting out. And it was about being able to operate more efficiently. It was about being able to take these intermittent resources and figure out how they fit into the grid. And again, people can flip on the switch. They can have their cold beer, they don't have to sit in the dark, and we can have a cleaner environment, and we can have actually a more cheap, a lower cost operation of the grid, because renewables have the benefit of A, not being connected to a pipeline or a fuel line. Your fuel is free, and it's plentiful as long as you can capture it. And also another fact, which is very important for us, and we realized it during the drought, is renewables don't use water. The largest user of freshwater reserves after the agricultural sector is the fossil fuel industry. So renewables actually can be quite a benefit when you're going through a drought. And in the last 5-year drought, if we hadn't had the escalation and acceleration of wind and solar coming on the grid, we would have been in deep trouble because our hydro resources were not as good. So it's really an interesting opportunity to be able to see that you are, in fact, able to incorporate intermittent resources on the grid. It becomes a technical challenge of how do you balance? How do you balance demand and supply? How do you balance the intermittency? Can you operate the grid efficiently and be able to rely on these resources as you phase out your base load? And we've also seen that we have less of a need for base load. And base load, even though it's considered completely reliable, it was the 24/7 supply, all of a sudden that myth has also been busted. With San Onofre going offline over, a very short period because there was a leak and not being able to be incorporated again, all of a sudden your most reliable 2,000 megawatts were gone. So nuclear maybe isn't as reliable as we thought it was before. And now we have Aliso Canyon down in another pocket where we have huge problems with the grid and being able to bring power in a reliable fashion, where gas has become a problem because we have a gas leak. And who would have thought? I mean, in all of our million years of operations, we wouldn't have foreseen that all of a sudden the natural caverns that we use to store the gas that we need to operate the power plants in a reliability pocket can leak. And therefore, we have to use them at a lower percentage or shut them down. And what are the technologies that come in to save the day? Capacitors, condensers, batteries, demand response, and people basically starting to realize, I don't need to be relying on someone to give me power one directionally, tell me this is the kilowatt hour I have to take, at this cost I have no choice. No, I have options now. I can have solar on my roof. I can have a battery to store the energy. I can use aggregators to play in the energy markets. And all of a sudden, I can have control of my own energy future. So what do I need the grid for? And why should the utility tell me what to do? And maybe I want more green power. And if I want more green power, who's going to supply it? And another interesting development, the CCAs have come up, which are basically an example of people wanting choice and people wanting to have more options. So the energy space has become quintessentially the democratization of choice and freedom. And that we're going to see seeping into the other industries, because decarbonizing the electricity grid, fine, we can do it. We can get to the 100%. Yeah, we'll get to 85 and we'll declare success, but we'll get there. The transportation sector accounts for 40% of emissions. If we're serious about, let's say climate change is a hoax, whatever you want to call it, if we're serious about our air quality and we're serious about the air we want to breathe and the quality of our life in our own communities, decarbonizing makes sense, and it also makes economic sense because it's the lowest cost alternative. So how are we going to actually electrify the other sectors? The transportation sector, which is key for us. How much resources do we need? How do we play with the transportation entities in order to be able to, all of us, work together to optimize a much bigger grid and a much bigger energy supply concept when we traditionally haven't worked together that closely on those levels? And that's extremely interesting. How do we electrify the fuel sector so that we take away the use of gas and minimize the use of gas? So that's not a risk factor anymore for us as well, because relying on pipelines isn't as reliable as we thought before. And if we've got plentiful renewable resources, why not do it? So these are interesting discussions that we have almost on a daily basis at the ISO. We want to be a driver, but we also know we can't compromise reliability. So reliability remains the number one priority, but we can ensure that reliability with an increased amount of renewables, with an increased amount of technologies that can absorb the excess generation, dispatch it when you need it, and are able to balance those resources and enable us to electrify transportation, the building sector, and the fuel sector as well, so that we can actually improve the quality, improve resiliency, improve efficiency, optimize operations across the board, and then use all of those new breakthroughs as an opportunity to export know-how to the rest of the world and continue our leadership. So it's very exciting. I mean, I think energy is the most exciting sector of all, and it's been a lot of fun to see what has happened in the last 10 years, and you're right. A lot is going on. It's transitioning very fast, but on a daily basis, it seems to be moving too slow. We've got to be doing more. So we do that, and it's something that we're happy and proud to work on every day, and hope that we can catalyze progress even faster.
So expanding on that a little bit, Ryan's rolling out buses, and you're talking about powering transportation. Ryan's rolling out buses over 600 kilowatt hours, right? And some of those buses. So one could envision a future with not only VTA but many transit agencies and of course private individuals have electric vehicles. What do you see as the opportunities, and how is CalISO supporting distributed energy resources, and what are the opportunities that's opening up in the market from your perspective?
Well, from our perspective, what we see right now, flexibility is king. So baseload resources aren't as important for us anymore. What we need is the ability to dispatch large amounts of energy very quickly and absorb large amounts of energy very quickly at certain times during the day. How many of you are familiar with the duck chart? Yeah, it's a good knowledge of it. So what we're seeing is, because we've got so much generation of solar, in the middle of the day, there's a reduction in the use, and then when solar goes off towards the evening, our new peak is the end of the day. And what we are realizing is that we need over 13,000 megawatts accelerating on every hour at the end of the day. So we have an initiative for 1,000 megawatts, 1,200 megawatts that the PUC has launched of storage. That doesn't even begin to shave off the first percentage that we need in the 13,000 megawatts. So we need a lot more flexibility, whether that's going to be pumped hydro, whether that's going to be ice storage, whether it's going to be something else. We don't know. We just know we want the flexible resource, and we've tried very hard to craft market rules that allows us to have that flexibility. It could be demand response. It could be energy efficiency. It could be buildings incorporating storage. It could be your buses plugging into the grid and being able to support us. I mean, we see buses also as a huge benefit in case there's a natural disaster, of being able to power critical facilities, which is also important. That is a huge mobile battery that you can take anywhere, and almost an emergency generator. So we want to be able to work in bidirectionally, vehicle to grid charging, and be able to allow operators to access the benefits of batteries that may be scattered throughout the day, because vehicles are sitting idle, and we drive them 3% or 4% of the time. So being able to access the individual batteries of every vehicle and compensate people for doing it, but also being able to access fleets, whether it's school buses, whether it's transit buses, or others, that we can utilize the batteries. And of course, then, if we want to get into the larger philosophical discussion, is how do we make sure that we optimize charging so they charge when we want them to charge, or if they do need to charge, that fast charging spike doesn't ripple into the grid and disrupt operations. So how do we take storage and strategically place it to insulate us from those spikes that could occur from charging during peak hours, which may be necessary certain times. And taking the secondary life of the batteries after they are done in mobile applications, which have only used about 20% of the battery's life, and taking those batteries that have 70% of their life left and utilizing them strategically throughout the grid to be able to beef up the grid. And that requires a lot of logistics, that requires a lot of analytics, that requires the Internet of Everything being able to allow us to communicate with all of these devices, all the way up to the individual appliance, your Samsung refrigerator or anything plugged into your home, your computers, your TVs, and being able to allow all of these resources to act on a grid level so that we are as efficient as we possibly can be and don't need redundancy and don't get stuck with a lot of power plants that we don't need and stranded assets that we invested in and now all of a sudden are obsolete.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was a perfect lead-in, Ryan, to the work that you're doing. As Angelina said, how do we optimize charging? How do we deal with the everything else? You guys are at the epicenter of dealing with a lot of these questions. What excites you in terms of what's happening on the ground?
Well, I'd say the thing I'm the most excited about is that it's clear now that this vision that a lot of leaders in clean energy and sustainability have had for a while is becoming a reality. I've attended this conference for a number of years back when it was simply focused on electric vehicle technology as the Charged Conference. And I think about how far we've come in such a short period of time. I've been working on electric vehicles for about 10 years now. And the idea that multiple companies in the electric vehicle space would be building battery packs for less than $300 a kilowatt hour. If you'd told me that even 3 years ago, I would have said that maybe there's a 50-50 chance that happens. I saw a research report today that was a teardown of a Chevy Bolt, and an analytical team had basically done the cost buildup. And the new information that's kind of leaking out into the market is that the Chevy Bolt's cost structure may be $4,000 better than a lot of the third-party analysts had thought. Tesla's cost per kilowatt hour is a very closely guarded secret, but it's really low. And as a bus manufacturer, our cost per kilowatt hour is very, very low, which means Nuria's cost per kilowatt hour, which translates into the cost of moving a human being a mile, is very low. So this is happening. And to put it in very human terms, 3 years ago when I started as the CEO of Proterra, our founder had done a great job of getting the product into a minimum viable product. We were in a half dozen cities. We went around and talked to a lot of the cities, and we asked them, what do you really need to make this happen? What would it require for you to implement a 100% zero-emission battery electric fleet? And what we found is that the answer was challenging, but it was not physically impossible. It was just going to take some good engineering. What most of the agencies wanted was 200 miles of real-world range. They wanted hill climb capability that was better than diesel bus. They wanted no local pollution. They liked the capabilities of a diesel bus. They just didn't like the baggage that came along with the diesel fuel. So exactly as Nuria was saying, they want a clean, quiet, safe, accessible, reliable, durable form of transportation. It's going to last 12 years in service. It's going to go 500,000 miles. So, a heavy-duty, high-capacity vehicle that doesn't have any fossil fuel strings attached. We got to work on that, and we focused on 3 areas: energy density on the battery pack, energy efficiency on the drivetrain, and lightweight materials. So we don't build a metal structure. Our bus is not like most of the buses out there, which are metal boxes. Ours is a carbon fiber composite vehicle. It's thousands of pounds less than a metal vehicle. If you're familiar with EV engineering, you know that lightweighting is the first place to start in getting energy efficiency. A year ago, actually a little bit less than a year ago, we drove a vehicle 603 miles around a test track with Michelin's help in securing the testing facility. That changed the conversation completely. It took the range anxiety off the table, because for these public transit agencies, which are the bedrock of our urban transportation, They typically do not wake up on a Saturday morning and decide they're going to drive the VTA bus to Vegas for a big weekend. These vehicles, they're operating at about 20, 25 miles an hour on average. They're out there for sometimes as many as 20 hours a day, but it is predictable. It's a solvable problem. The distribution curve on the shortest route and the longest route, it's a much tighter distribution than cars. So what does that mean today? It means we are coming up on $500 million of orders for our product in terms of contracts and awards. We are going to triple shipments this year. Then we're going to double next year, and then we think we'll have to double after that. Our next available build slots that we can offer to a customer are the third quarter of 2018. That's why I was a little nervous, because I know we need to get VTA, their initial deployment, by the end of this year, and there are 28 other cities that are in that queue. And in talking to my sales team earlier this week, we're talking actively with 57 U.S. cities right now about what they're doing and when. And things are happening so fast that sometimes we can lose sight of how much good work is being done. So sometimes it used to be that when we would get an order, somebody would ring the gong at work and it was incredibly exciting. We got an order last night and it came in in email. We got another one today. And we signed an MOU today on a deal. For the first time in my tenure at the company, we had an order that went basically from award to delivery to cash that I had nothing to do with. It just happened. It's becoming a business. So we shipped 6 vehicles to Park City, Utah. They showed up. They're being commissioned. We'll go out there. And, Park City is a great microcosm. It's a community just like the Bay Area where the people there take a lot of pride in the land, in the culture, in the outdoors. They want to keep that valley beautiful. They have 3 world-class ski resorts right there. They have a fare-free transit system. I'm not suggesting we do that here, but it's 40 or 50 buses, and my kids and I have taken the buses because it's a pain in the neck to park at the bottom of the ski resort. So it's a great little transit system for a small town. The only thing that wasn't so great about it was what that diesel fuel smelled like on a cold, clear winter day. You could smell it in the vehicle, right? So the 6 vehicles that we just shipped them, they take so much pride in them that each vehicle has a different decor. One's like a mountain biker, one's a snowboarder, one's a skier, one's a fly fisherman, one's on a luge board or sled. Nobody does that if they're just deploying a conventional vehicle, but this is different. This is clean, it's electric. And just to give you a sense of how big this is getting, we've seen multiple cities in the US say, by 2030, I'm 100% zero emission. I'll be EV and hydrogen only, that's it. Some really big properties, like Seattle thinks they'll have it done by 2034. We met with 3 cities from Canada earlier this week. They are running 95% hydroelectric, so they want to convert their whole system. But just in terms of where this is, there is a massive clean energy market and transition going on, and it's happening outside of California. We're not on our own. We don't have to do everything by ourselves. A lot of cities agree with us that this is a good idea. So, we have 5 cities in Washington State already that are doing this. So it's Seattle, it's Kitsap County, it's Pierce, it's Everett. We have 12 cities in California that are already there. VTA is one of the leaders, but it's also smaller towns in California. So it's Fresno, it's Visalia, it's Modesto. We're deploying to Foothill Transit right now in Southern California. We're deploying to Humboldt County. Electric vehicles work at scale, and they work at small scale because you can do 1 charger, 1 vehicle. Our 3rd largest market is Texas. So, we've got vehicles in San Antonio. At night, San Antonio has 2,000 megawatt hours of wind that are at 0 marginal cost. They don't need enough buses to soak up all that wind, but for their region, electric buses and trucks that charge at night, they're going to be buying power at 1 cent a kilowatt hour. So the buses are going to drive all day. That's when the humans are awake. And they're going to charge all night because that's when the wind is booming in West Texas and Wyoming and Utah, in the Altamont Pass here. We're in Tennessee. We have 2 customers in Kentucky. We have a customer in Florida. We just picked up our other customer in Florida. We have a city in South Carolina that hasn't purchased diesel fuel for their municipal fleet in 3 years. South Carolina, right? Massachusetts, we're starting a pilot program with New York City. The Big Apple is going to be tough. They've got 4,000 transit vehicles. So if you add up all 24 transit agencies in the greater Bay Area, that's New York. So I might be calling you for help, Nuria, in terms of dealing with the 4,000-pound gorilla. But it's good. I saw a board report that LA Metro is going to go zero emission at the transit level, 100% by 2030. So I guess sort of my closing comment, because I don't want to use up too much time, is just that if I had to make a prediction, we're a private company, so I can just say whatever, and it's not material, non-public information. But I would say by 2019, the diesel hybrid market in transit and truck is under serious pressure, as in electrics will probably be cheaper on an acquisition cost basis. I think our cost structure in terms of building our vehicle today as a startup company is cheaper than a diesel hybrid bus. By 2021, I don't think there's a value proposition for a CNG deployment in truck or bus because EV will have dropped below them. And by 2025, and I think before 2025, a brand new electric bus in Europe, China, or the US will be cheaper than a brand new diesel bus. These are not wild, ungrounded predictions. EV has gotten cheaper by 6 to 8% in our market every year, like clockwork, for the last 7 years. And CNG, diesel, and hybrid have gone up 3 to 4% every year. So those are very mature technologies, diminishing returns. And I mean, we're still tearing huge chunks of cost out of the technology. We're still finding 500 watt hours a mile that we can peel off of the efficiency here and there. So it's going to be a really good future. You're going to have a mix of driven and autonomous vehicles. Transportation cost per mile is going to plummet, as in you'll be able to get from point A to point B for less. Oil usage, first by the public transit market and then by a lot of these local delivery services, is going to drop very, very quickly. And 10 years from now, when a bus or a taxi pulls up in front of you, it's going to be quiet, it's going to be clean, it's going to be reliable, it'll be cheap. And I hope we don't have to spend as much time in our cars.
Or go to war.
So, Bill, you're hearing analytics from Angelina to deal with all these assets. You're hearing thousands of electric buses, driving innovation at VTA. Mm-hmm. What do you see that's exciting you as these spaces start to develop?
Well, I think what's exciting is the world that's described by the steamed panel here is very real. We used to, and I think that's really the significant transition that I've noticed as a business person working with cities. I've only worked in the public sector at Microsoft over the last 5 years, so I'm new to the public sector. And one of the things that is the big realization from somebody who's worked in commercial business then goes into the public sector is how long it takes to get things done in the public sector. That's the big challenge. And it's daunting to startups because that doesn't necessarily feed the business model that a startup needs is, quick to revenue. But I think cities in general, and this on a global basis, are changing in a dramatic way that's fueling the growth that we're talking about here. And I see it in a couple of key areas. One area is what Nuria described as, come work with us, and we want to help you develop your technology and create a market, and we'll benefit, you'll benefit. I mean, that kind of offer from an agency or a city in general isn't new, but it's something that's become more consistent, especially with the most progressive, forward-looking cities, places that you'd want to work with on new technologies. So that's a really good thing that's happening, that recognition. And the second piece of it is that there's a real willingness to partner, and it's really part of that same model in that the cities that we're working with aren't in a dialogue where you're our customer. And we're always in a dialogue around I'm selling to you, you're buying from us. That's not a very productive dialogue in terms of driving innovation, making new things happen. It's working in partnership. Now the challenge there is what's the business model that we can execute in that type of scenario. companies in the software business or who are innovating on new technologies aren't necessarily looking to do pilots. That's not you can't sustain a business by doing small pilots. So finding the business models that drive scale business, I think, is the biggest challenge that's in front of us now. So I think there's been great progress. There are real partnerships happening with cities globally. And I think as Ryan was pointing out about the real awareness of driving sustainability, there's so many good reasons to manage your city in a sustainable fashion because of all of the benefits, and I think those are really recognized by a growing number of cities. So that's helping fuel the opportunity. Just one last comment. I think one of the ways that we're trying to take a new approach and develop new business models is looking. It's in some ways it makes things more complicated because the process that we're looking at is something that our technology and civic engagement team has been incubating over the last couple of years, and that is, how do we embrace the number of stakeholders in a city? How do we really understand the community and what's driving that particular city? That's not the typical approach that a technology company like Microsoft would have taken 10 years ago. We would have had much more of a straightforward dialogue about, okay, the city's buying our software, and we have an agreement for X number of years for all the software that they're using, and then we will support and maintain that, and then we'll do it again when that contract expires. This is a much different approach where we really create relationship so that we understand the solutions. And this is true of any number of partners that we might work with. I would add the most important thing is we're not working alone. We're working in partnership with other technology companies. And there's typically almost a neutral third party, let's call it the organization that's embedded in the city. There's two really good examples in San Francisco, a very small group called City Innovate, which is part of Super Public, and they do a really nice job at driving the conversation in a very positive way, very results oriented, and I've been amazed at the depth of conversation that we've had with a number of cities working in a small group. And instead of meeting at a big conference, we're around a table, 18 or 20 people, whiteboarding and working on the problem. To me, that's a huge breakthrough and really exhilarating and different way to approach the business. I just came from a meeting in Chicago yesterday with another partner that we have like this. It's called UI Labs in Chicago. They're doing digital manufacturing, but they're also focused on cities' infrastructure. And in that meeting, we had this very productive discussion, really moderated and driven agenda-wise by City Digital, which is part of UI Labs focused on infrastructure. But around the table, we had the CTA, the Chicago Transit Authority, several startup businesses, Microsoft, and a partner of ours, but working very independently, in this case, MasterCard, working on the transaction side of that business. I see what's happening in those kinds of forums as a new way of creating business opportunity. And in that scenario, you're really working with the government or the government agency as a partner. To me, that's the biggest breakthrough.
That's very interesting. Well, one of the things that we hope is apparent, and is certainly, I think, industry-wide, is bringing together folks across sectors is really critical now because there's so much convergence happening. And in fact, that is why Charged and Connected became what it is now, which is innovation and impact. And Bill, probing a little bit farther, we've had, in fact, several panels dealing with data in today's event. And in fact, I sat in on one dealing with mobility and, of course, privacy, sharing, security were, major focus of discussion, and what's the business model around all of this. And maybe you can talk a little bit of what you see as kind of the key needs for us to get smarter in our use of
Sure.
data to deliver better quality of life.
Nuria and I had a quick conversation back, and I was reminded that the world that most people are in is one that is just still getting its arms wrapped around open data scenarios and how to make those scenarios productive. And even from the cities or the agencies' perspective, how do you manage that?
Yeah.
So that's a big challenge. I think the interesting thing about data, we all talk about it like, oh, it's just this easy thing. It's data. Get the data. The data will tell us everything we need to know. There's great insights in data. The data is extremely valuable. The data is so valuable that nobody will share their data with you. and this is not a new conversation. This is a longstanding conversation with across markets, and so it would be unfair to point at government agencies, although utilities have been notorious at not wanting to share their data in general. So I think we're in the midst of a transition there as well. I think we're very excited about the work that we just announced today with the Data Lab and the partnership there, and I think that in some ways is a tip of the iceberg or the point of the spear in terms of having a platform, a neutral platform where people can share data. I think the biggest challenge in sharing data is we don't trust each other. It's really a fundamental thing, and it's something that we at Microsoft and companies like us we think about this all the time, because if you can't trust our cloud, then we don't have a business. So that's true of any cloud provider. Trust is the thing that you hold most dear. It's your most highly valued asset. So you're very careful with that. At the same time, if you're I think the holy grail for me and what I'm working on, I do have one good example, is the notion that you could have a trusted platform for people to collaborate. And that data could be held by a trusted party, and then people who wanted access to that data, entities that wanted access to that data, would follow the business process managed by that entity to ensure that the data was kept secure and private as the owner of the data prescribed. So that in itself is complicated. We've been working for the last we've been working for I think 5 or 6 years now with the University of California at Davis and the Energy Efficiency Center there. It's been a great relationship, and I've been part of that partnership from the beginning. It provided so many insights for us into our business, but the drought, like a lot of crisis, how do you say plural for like a crisis creates an opportunity. That's the word I'm looking for. And the opportunity that we had is trying to understand in California, where was the water data when we needed it, right? There was, and it turns out, to the surprise of no one in this room, most likely, that there isn't a single source of data for the state of California. And like a lot of public resources, something that's as precious and fundamental, to our economy as water. You think that's something we should get our arms around, and that's so we started down that path with the University of California, Davis, and Professor Frank Loge and the Center for Water Energy Efficiency, where we started looking, and within this Center for Water Energy Efficiency, Frank is really looking at embedded energy in water, which is a big deal in California. It's a big deal in climates like ours, but if you think of arid climate, water resources distributed around the state that have to be moved. So California, Western, Southern Europe, Middle East, Australia, there's all kinds of environments like ours where there's a significant amount of embedded energy in water. But to get after that problem, you need the data from both the electricity and the water. So now you have those two separate data sets that are two different owners, two different utilities, and now the challenge is putting those together. And that's what's happening in the work that we're doing there. And we're proving out that that you can do this in a secure and private. You can secure the data. You can ensure the data is private, including the critical infrastructure information and all of the NIST compliance that needs to be, all the compliance that needs to be adhered to make that work. So I think there's a lot. There's still we still have a ways to go, so it needs to be easier to do. It's hard to do, but it's possible.
Excellent. So there's plenty of work for everybody in this room.
Yes, and the same pattern certainly applies to transportation. We can take the same model and say, okay, we have silos of data. We need to share them to make an end-to-end scenario really efficient and something that the agency can manage.
Yeah,
So-
origin destination is
Yeah,
certainly
exactly.
Data that would be useful,
Yeah.
and we've struggled a little bit with that,
Yeah.
trying to figure out where people are going.
I'm very excited about that scenario right now. So.
Yeah.
Well, we are running a little bit over, but this is very rich discussion. We are standing between the audience and the drawing for the Surface Pro, so there's a lot of anxiety in the room on that. But
It looks like a
before
very
we-
calm. I don't see any anxiety.
I was wondering why there were so many people still here. It's the Surface Pro.
But we do want to take a couple questions from the audience before we close, and so we have time for a couple quick questions. So I see one hand over here. Do we have microphones, please?
Hi, you had mentioned using the buses as backup batteries, and I was just talking to a friend about this, that because I've always thought, hey, if it's on wheels and it's an electric vehicle, it's got all those batteries in there, why not just reverse it if you need to? But they were then saying, oh, it leads to battery degradation, and so most manufacturers are warning against that. I just wondered your thoughts.
Ryan or Angelina, you want to
Yeah,
take a crack
that was
at that?
Angelina.
I mean, I'm sure Ryan can go into the technical details, but in order to be able to utilize those batteries, certainly you want to operate them in a way that doesn't deplete them prematurely, and you want to cycle them in a way that actually works in the best possible manner for the batteries. But on the other hand, if you need grid services and they're providing the grid services, you should be able to compensate them commensurately with the use. So being able to understand what is the cycling, what is the optimal use, how are you stressing the battery and pay for that is something that we can certainly consider, and we should be learning throughout the process on how to do it. And ultimately, I think utilities and grid operators would actually be interested in owning the batteries and taking that cost from the first cost of the vehicle and saying, you know what, this is fuel. We want to own it. We want to control how it's used. If it's depleted, that's our asset. We'll just put in new batteries. I don't know if that will work for you. It may or it may not, but it would certainly reduce the first cost of a vehicle. And if it's something where it's a personal use vehicle, like a Tesla or a Bolt or any other electric vehicle, stripping the battery cost, which is probably your largest cost item, right off the bat reduces the cost of the vehicle and makes it even more cost effective. And then the life cycle cost of the vehicle is certainly cheaper than anything else. And if you're able to capitalize on the use of the batteries by allowing them to participate as grid services and be compensated for that, should be a win-win all around.
So when are you starting that?
We're talking about starting that. We've got to get to vehicle to grid, we've got to get to secondary battery use, but certainly that is one of the issues we're looking towards. And if we want to deploy millions and millions of cars in California, if you ask me personally, we should have a program where it's zero cost to begin with. You pay a small lease, and depending on what that lease is, you can bring the lease cost down by allowing your battery to be charged and discharged for grid use, so that you can actually have a zero cost car and a zero cost operation for the car. And imagine what that would do to the market, especially now that we're expecting by around 2025 the vehicles to be lower cost than anything else out there. So if utilities and grid operators are smart and strip the cost of the batteries and start utilizing them more efficiently, this is going to open the doors to electrifying the transportation sector much faster.
And Ryan, I'm
Yeah,
sure you have
I'll
some
just
thoughts here.
Add really quickly. It's important to not innovate if there isn't a problem to solve, right? So I think we're so used to the answer in clean energy being like, well, when we invent this new technology, then it'll work. For some of these applications, they already work, they already pencil out today. And in the case of a city transit bus, while you could use it as backup power in an emergency, there's not much of a business case for taking a $500,000 city bus and not using it to move people. The reason I'm in transportation is it's more valuable to move things than it is to light up a room. It is a much more, it's a much higher value form of energy. It's a harder job to provide. It's why oil companies are worth a lot more than electricity companies. So what that tells you is replacing a diesel mile with a battery is more valuable than competing with the grid. So it works. You can cycle a battery, but it's a bad business case to take one of Nuria's $500,000 buses and not have it move 70 people. Because you're selling power to the grid at, 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So it works. I think it works better in school buses and in cars because those sit more. But the vehicles we make, they are either recharging or they're driving. Or they're being washed or maintained. Life of a city bus, there's not a lot of idle time in the system.
But you could use them in a crisis, and that's not
Yes.
to push it. If there is a crisis and you need VAR support or you need grid support, so it's not necessarily to use them as kilowatt hours, but to use them as grid services that are very critical, and we need to start monetizing those.
Nuria, did you want to comment on that?
No, I was just reflecting on what she said about using them in a crisis, and yes, to a certain degree, but we also pride ourselves in that we have a fleet that is available for emergencies where we have to move people from locations if there's an earthquake, fire, or flood. So it's just trying to find a balance, and maybe the 20% electric buses can be used in a crisis to provide energy and electricity.
And moving to one last question here.
Yeah. Couldn't it also be an option that you as an energy provider, that you provide not only stationary energy, but also mobile energy? So coming back to this question, that basically the batteries of these large buses, for instance, are owned by you. So you can charge them whenever it's most cost effective. You can use them. You can use them as a second afterlife or whatever, second life. So it makes probably a complete new business case, because then VTA would only pay half of the price for the bus,
Or less even.
or less even, and you might also have a good business case for that.
Definitely, yes.
Sounds like a new business venture opportunity.
Yeah, it would certainly work with us. We only have 2 routes that are 24 hours. Everything else pretty much ends at midnight.
Right.
Well, regrettably, we will have to bring this to a close, but please join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists.